On this episode, I'm joined by Zizipho Poswa as we discuss the themes, use of materials, and tenets that guide her work and practice as a visual artist and ceramicist. Zizipho discusses her first New York solo exhibition at Southern Guild, titled The Seed, which is called Imbewu in Xhosa, her native language. Zizipho is a South African artist from the Eastern Cape, and this show traces the last decade of her career, bringing together 5 distinct bodies of work that reflect on where she's been as an artist, her continuity and growth, and what lies ahead. She shares insights into the critical role women played in her life, from her own family to the women in her community, spanning several key components of women's lives, from traditional wedding ceremonies to hairstyles and the concept of mothers carrying children. Zizipho links her womanhood to her training in textiles and later in clay. In her practice, she draws connections between ritual ceremonies and adornments to create monumental ceramic and bronze works. This conversation is a tender and thoughtful reflection on the relationships between mothers and daughters and their children, between women working and living in communities, and the nurturing environments that help creativity to develop. Let's dive into my next episode with Zizipho Poswa.
My name is Zizipho Poswa. I am a ceramic artist based in Cape Town, South Africa, originally from the Eastern Cape in Mthatha, in a small town called Mthatha.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Zizipho Poswa, for joining me on an episode of Everything is Connected. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you today. And I'd love to jump right in and talk about the show that you have on view titled The Seed Imbewu, on view now at Southern Guild in New York. I know it's your first solo exhibition in New York, so of course it's a special moment. What does the title of the show mean for you?
Imbewu is an overview of the work that I've created over the past decade. It's an overview of the practice. It consists of about 5 different bodies of work that I've created in that period. And it's basically about looking back at how far I've come and also looking at how much more still needs to be accomplished.
Yes, and as you think about that, I want to talk a little bit about some of the recurring themes in your work, the ideas that you come back to again and again, some of the ideas that you've investigated over your time as an artist. Can you speak a little bit about what some of those ideas are, your recurring themes, and why they're important to you, why they show up in the work, and why you continually think about investigating them again and again?
Yes. Let me speak of Imbewu itself. It speaks of continuity and looking at this body of work across time. There's a single line of inquiry that is unfolding through different expressions. As I mentioned, there's 5 different bodies of work, beginning with Ilobola, which celebrates our traditional African traditional wedding, and also going through to Ubuhle Bokhokho, acknowledging and honoring the majesty of our hair as Black people, and also celebrating the women who make the hair, who craft the hair, and also the gift that we've been given by our ancestors. And then I moved on to Insika Zesizwe, which is the pillars of the nation, and that is a celebration of the resilience and the strength of an African woman. As you see, the work carries a form of a woman carrying a load, and that speaks to the power and the role they play in our society.
Would you say that? Thank you for sharing that deep and thoughtful explanation about your work, because I think it immediately makes me curious about some of your origins and some of your earlier memories, the earlier parts of your story that led you to want to investigate these specific ideas of womanhood, of matrilineal lineages, of the celebration of African culture and African people, and the many different traditions that we have. Your traditions as a South African woman, What are some of the reasons why you feel that this is the path you wanted to take as an artist? And also why these are some of the ideas that you wanted to think about and make visual in your work as an artist?
It's how my background, how I was raised by extraordinary women. I was raised by a single parent who didn't only raise me, but also raised me with my cousins. And being surrounded by strong, powerful women in my home and in my community, I think that was the main inspiration for me. So I've always wanted to honor those women and celebrate them in every way in the medium that I experienced in. And so it's a natural thing for me to want to celebrate how I was raised and where I come from and who raised me. Yes, in that sense.
Work within ceramics, within the field of working with clay, often working with your hands. Was this something that you ever engaged in early in your life before becoming an artist, potentially before going to school, maybe as a child, as a young girl?
Yes, I was fortunate to have a mother who who saw the talent from a young age, and she really nurtured it. She allowed me to have the freedom to create, and she encouraged me. She knew I was going to be an artist, and I was excited about it. And it was something unique because you never saw an artist. It was a special career. And so she was a teacher, and she just gave me the platform to be who I am. And so from the primary school till matric to my high school, I was creating. I was sewing for my dolls. I was making paper sculptures, collecting found objects. And yeah, I was creating from a young age. And so it was an easy thing for me to choose.
And so I would imagine that you must credit a lot of the feeling that you could pursue a career and a path in the arts from your mother's nurturing early on.
Yes, definitely. Immediately when I finished my high school, I had to start applying and looking for universities. And then I looked into Nelson Mandela University of Technology. And then I enrolled in textile design and technology.
How did you make the jump or the switch or the pivot from working in textiles to working in clay?
So when you start with the foundation, you are introduced through a foundation course where they know you then get exposed to different disciplines. So I was exposed to ceramics from the beginning and many others like textiles and fine art and stained glass and sculpture, all of those. And I enjoyed all of them, but I had to choose one. And for me, textile design or surface design resonated more because it was then going to allow me to explore in terms of different surfaces. And so clay has just become one of the canvases.
At this point in your practice, are there any other mediums that you experiment with? Other mediums that you may be interested in working with? Or other mediums that potentially inform your ceramic work?
Yes, I've worked a lot with bronze from my first body of work. And it's been bronze and ceramics, particularly because of the two together. For me, they translate to what it means to be a strong woman, and also translating, I think they complemented each other in the way that I would like to tell my story as well. But I also look forward to exploring other materials like glass and wood. Yeah, I just don't like to be limited. I feel like there's definitely more materials to explore, and that's what I want to do. I want to explore all the other materials, but clay will always be my material.
I want to talk a little bit about you starting Iniso Ceramics with Andile.
Galvani. Yes, yes.
How did you come to start a ceramic studio with Andile. And at the time that you began that, which I believe is more than 10 years ago now, you started in 2015.
So it's actually longer than that. We're turning 20 as a studio. This is something that we immediately got into after university because we met at university. We worked a bit in different studios. I worked in a textile studio. He worked in a ceramic studio. And we soon realized that we were limited. We could not create our own designs, and we wanted to have the freedom to create our own designs and tell our own stories. And so that's how it started. So we were a group of 5. We had 3 other friends. One was a creative, and the 2 were more in the operational side of the business. So we started in 2006. That was then, yes. We're turning 20 this year.
Firstly, congratulations. What an exceptional milestone to have been able to develop and continue to maintain and grow and nurture the studio over your career, and also alongside build your career independently. What an incredible achievement.
Yes, we're so proud of ourselves. And just recently we were saying, how do we celebrate such a milestone? And we were like, there's so many ideas. We're working towards actually putting together a book that captures the whole timeline from the beginning, 2006 till 2026. And so there's exciting ideas of things that are going to be coming up before the end of the year. And yeah, I guess it's something that we wanted and we just went for it. We didn't doubt that it was going to be successful. We were just believing in ourselves. And so we produced from a few bags of clay, which ended up being showcased in an art fair in Joburg. And then we came back and we started having to hire people. And from there, we had to juggle between, at the end of the day, it's a business. So we had to make sure we've got an accountant, we've got a salesperson, and someone to run the operational side of things for us to be able to create. And so, yeah, it's been a journey, a beautiful one. And along the way, connecting with Southern Guild. And that's how then the independent artist careers then began sometime in 2000 maybe 2008 or earlier on, we met Julian and Trevin. And that's when they were starting Southern Guild. Yeah.
I mean, I think what is coming up for me with your answer, and again, congratulations because it's such a big feat, is what you said about believing in yourself early on, never doubting that you could make it happen, never feeling what people call imposter syndrome, never feeling like, can I do this? Can I actually make it happen? Do I have the right? I think folks tend to feel like that about many different kinds of things. Feeling self-doubt is it's a very normal thing to feel, right? But also feeling confidence is also a very normal thing to feel. It depends on how you look at it, right? And it depends on how you frame it. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Because I just think it's so critical to be able to walk into something with that confidence and with that sense of, I can do this and nothing's going to stop me.
Yes. We had already started with going to university and we've achieved our education and we wanted to put that into practice. And for us, it was the perfect time. But also, it's not as if there were no challenges, but we didn't focus on the challenges. I think they made us stronger. We wanted to build this design house. And for us, it was just being in the studio and creating. And fortunately, we also had a setup that allowed people to walk in, potential customers. And so we engaged, we spoke, we met different people from different parts of the world. And that contributed in terms of being able to send the pieces to different parts of the world. And that was a motivation to see that whatever we're making can sell and people can appreciate it and keep on coming back.
Yes, in some sense, it validates the work. You see people out there in the world, you're selling the work that you sell, they have a great response to it. You build your business because of more sales, more people talk about the work, and that continues to grow the business.
Yes, and the most special thing was the stories we were telling. I think people were so drawn to the stories we were telling, and we were being authentic and honest about who we are. And it was just that I think made people believe that this is something special that we're creating. And we just continued looking into our culture and our identity. And that contributed so much to the meaning of what we're doing and the value of the stories we're telling. And the work itself was quite special. I mean, it's so very special. Yeah.
Sounds like you were really pulling on your authenticity, not trying to be anything else, but truly, fully who you are and what you are, and celebrating that through the visual language.
Yes. And keeping that going by going back home and speaking to the elders and researching more about our culture. And that's what we're doing now. Each body of work carries a lot of education, a lot of who we are in it, a lot of authenticity about our culture as well.
Yeah, I love that you shared that because I'm thinking about a few things. One is so many African traditions have an oral history. So there's this very real fact of information and knowledge being transferred by the mouth, by the speech, and by stories that are kept by elders and then passed down. And so what generally occurs in that kind of situation is you don't have a written reference for something. You have to have that
Agree.
knowledge inside. And I just was thinking about the idea of creating works around certain kinds of ritualistic beliefs, traditional beliefs, cultural legacies, any of the kind of visual sort of artistry and craftsmanship that comes out of your own culture. You brought up elders, and I'm thinking about the ability that many people have in many cultures to reference a book or look at a photograph or look at something as a form of inspiration or a point of departure to making a visual piece of work. Have you found that in your case, when speaking with elders or engaging with elders, do you ever find yourself creating work based on your idea of something that is being discussed? As in, you don't have a visual representation of it. You have someone speaking about a concept, and then you create work out of that concept.
Yes, yes. I can say I have incorporated information that has come across. Sometimes it's through dreams and visions. So we do connect a lot with our ancestors, and we believe that we are the vessels and we are used to translate or transform the messages that are being communicated. And so some of the ideas are things that I've not seen, but I try to understand the meaning of it. And by just starting to create, and then it gets to evolve into something clearer as I sketch, or as I start with a little miniature work, and then I get to understand what this means. But in the beginning, it can be vague, and sometimes it can be very clear that I know now I need to speak about our hair, or I need to speak about the meaning of bride price, and some of the information as I research and I speak to the elders, then I also need to figure out how to translate that into form. And some of the messages are not that straightforward. It might be an ongoing research in terms of form, of how I would translate that. And maybe the material is not the best. And so I would leave it, and I know when the time is right, when I find the right material, it might come to life.
You mentioned in your response the idea of a miniature, a smaller version, a study. Do you generally create your large works starting with a study?
Yes, from a spiritual point where ideas come or a dream happens, I try and sketch through to understand how the form is going to look like. And then with the miniatures of the studies, that kind of guides me, but it does not guarantee that it will end up in that form. It's just like a form of guide. But when I make something large scale, it takes the life of its own as well, and I allow it to be as it is being made.
Yes. As we round out the episode, I want to talk a little bit about really what your work looks like, right? So, for the people who may be listening or watching who haven't actually seen your work up close and personal, haven't really experienced the sort of commanding and monumental presence of such large works, but also these very beautiful, feminine, somewhat feminine forms that you see in the work. What are some of the most interesting things that people have said to you about how they're experiencing your work? There's this beautiful moment where artists have a show and people get to come up to them and talk about the work and say what they felt or what it evoked for them, what emotion they grappled with. Has there been anything that people have shared with you that's been really surprising about your work?
I wouldn't say surprising, but what has made me happy was to know that they relate to it. They can see what it means. They can connect to it in that way. For instance, the last body of work, which is called Imbewu, where a woman is carrying a child at the back. They saw from just the form itself. So I enjoy that abstraction and that they can still read through that abstraction and they see power and beauty in that. Yeah.
Would you say that your work straddles sort of the world of figuration and abstraction? Even though you don't depict any faces, there are elements of the work that feel very human like and
Yes.
figurative.
Yes. Definitely it does. It does. The bases that I create are always a representation of women. So the abstraction of it, I think it also balances how do I translate this one? But yeah, I think it's being me as an artist, as I create, it's my way of creating. And sometimes I also feel like it's a more deeper thing that I can't even explain myself when I look at the work. I also experience it like a viewer when it's finished and wonder what my ancestors were telling me and appreciate at the same time the outcome of the whole process from the idea to the making to the final piece that gets appreciated in different parts of the world. While they also carry very important people in my life and people that are carrying the society on their shoulders. And so it's always going to be a celebration and an honor to do that.
Yes. That's so beautiful. I'm so touched by what you said because I think about what you said earlier about the idea of being a vessel, of being a transmitter or a translator of ideas, right? That wisdom and knowledge is being passed down through you from your
Yeah.
ancestors,
Yeah.
and that we see that made manifest in this in your incredible artwork, but also in this visual language that you've created, right? Drawing this connection between what you see, what you feel, what you experience, and then making that exist in clay in the real world, in the 3D. And so I'm just so touched that you share that because I think that connection to source, that connection to where we come from, and also thinking about what you give to the next generation is so incredibly powerful and so important to do.
Yes, definitely. So the seed was really about thinking about the legacy, the growth, and these are seeds of hope for my community, for the next generation, and many generations to come. This is something they will look at and it will inspire them. And that is the intention.
We got it. Zizi Poswa, thank you so much for joining me on an episode of Everything is Connected.
Thank you so much for having me too. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
That was my episode with Zizipho Poswa. I want to give a big shout out and a big thank you to Zizi for joining me on the show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider supporting our work by becoming a subscriber. When you subscribe to Lightwork, you support the work of contemporary artists and the insightful and impactful conversations that I have with them as we investigate art, culture, and society. You support a female founder and a Black entrepreneurship at a time when our government and private corporations continue to eradicate DEI efforts. Subscribe to our Substack and you'll receive exclusive information and resources about each episode, behind the scenes content, and more. And remember, follow Lightwork across social platforms for more insights into the inner world of contemporary artists and thought leaders shaping culture.